Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us during the Lytham Partners 2024 Investor Select Conference. My name is Ben Shamsian, Vice President, Lytham Partners. During this Fireside chat webcast, we welcome Delcath Systems, ticker symbol DCTH on the NASDAQ. Joining us today from the company is Gerard Michel, Delcath's Chief Executive Officer. Also joining us today is Bill Maughan, Senior Research Analyst with Canaccord Genuity, whom I've had asked to moderate today's Fireside chat. Bill covers a wide array of cancer therapy companies at Canaccord Genuity, including Delcath. Before I turn it over to Bill, I want to remind everyone that management is available for one-on-one meetings throughout the conference. If you have not already signed up and would like to schedule a one-on-one meeting, please send me an email at shamsian@lythampartners.com. That's SHAMSIAN at lythampartners.com, or visit lythampartners.com/select2024. One further note, Bill will have a presentation regarding cancer therapies coming up here at 10 a.m. Eastern today. A link is available on the conference homepage. With that said, Bill, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Gerard, for joining me here. So I guess just to start off, for anyone who's not familiar with the company, do you mind just giving the 3-minute overview to kick us off?
Sure. We have a drug-device combination product called Hepzato Kit, regulated as a drug by the FDA, will be reimbursed as a drug, or is being reimbursed as a drug. The combination drug device allows the delivery of very high doses of chemotherapy to liver melphalan at levels that systemically a patient would not be able to withstand. Because the working cells in the liver, hepatocytes, are very robust. They can handle, high levels of toxins. You're able actually to dose at levels you otherwise wouldn't be able to, and therefore get much better response rates for cancers in the liver. Now, longer term, we're looking at treating all sorts of cancers in the liver, whether or not it's primary HCC or cancers that have a high propensity for metastases such as colorectal. At the moment, our first approval is for metastatic uveal melanoma. That's an ultra-orphan cancer that starts in the eye. And when it does metastasize, about 50% of the time, it's almost always to the liver, and patients generally die from liver failure. We're just in the midst of launch. We treated our first patient last week. And so it's an very exciting time for the company. The product's already on NCCN guidelines. So we expect fairly rapid uptake, with the one caveat that this is a procedure, and there is training involved. So, it will be a site-by-site uptake as we get those sites trained.
Okay. And just to talk about those data real quick, what did you see in terms of pivotal endpoints that supported approval?
Sure. So it was a single-arm trial, and the primary endpoint was overall response rate. We powered the trial against a meta-analysis of checkpoint inhibitors, various IO therapies. The upper bound of that meta-analysis was 8.3% in terms of response rate. Our lower bound at 95% confidence interval was 26.4%. So we sailed well over that. The actual OR was a little over 36%. Which is a great response rate and is very, very difficult to treat disease. These were durable responses of about 14 months, precisely actually. About 3 out of 4 patients had some level of disease control. The median PFS was 9 months, and the OS was just shy of 21 months. Now, obviously, we can't detail cross studies, but oncologists will look at that level. And the only product that comes close to that OS, slightly exceeds it, is Kimmtrak or tebentafusp, which was recently approved about a year and a half ago, approved for this disease state in a subset of patients who have a certain HLA allele. And that's about 45% of the TAM that we have. As an aside, I don't view that as a competitive product. Patients generally get more than one line of therapy. They generally get a liver-directed as well as a systemic therapy. So I look at it as more complementary. But it is, interesting to note that in their trial, where they treated all first-line patients with a lower mean and median tumor burden than our trial. Our trial had a mix of about half first line, half, second, third, fourth line. We had close to the same OS. Theirs was 21.7, if I remember correctly. It's about a year longer, a month longer, excuse me. But again, essentially similar, almost the same OSs. We had more advanced patient population. So docs, when they look at this data, do find it compelling. And again, for the appropriate patients, we think we'll get very, very heavy penetration eventually.
Okay, let's stay on that topic for a second. So thinking about that commercial opportunity, how many patients are there? And I know you alluded to it, but let's just hammer down those numbers. How many patients with metastatic ocular melanoma are there? And what is a reasonable goal for market share, peak revenue? And I guess part of that question is can you go through the pricing of Hepzato?
Sure. So we think there are about 800 patients who fit within our label. There are probably about 1,000 patients a year. These are incidence numbers that get diagnosed with metastatic disease. And I think about 800 of those would fit within our label. Now, our pricing is premium ultra-orphan pricing. We used as a marker what Kimmtrak or tebentafusp was priced at. They are priced at close to almost $800,000 on average per patient. It's about 20 grand a week for therapy. Their mean number of treatments that we saw in an abstract they published is 41. That comes to just under $800,000 per patient. The mean number of treatments in our trial was 4.1. Patients get it about every 6 to 8 weeks. It's going to probably be more like every 2 months in the real world. Little slightly over 4 treatments is what patients get. For us, for the trial, we priced at about $750,000 per patient, which comes about precisely $182,500 per kit. Using that math, if we got a 40% penetration, it'd be well north of $300 million or close to $300 million in revenue. If I look at what tebentafusp did, and we will not get the same rate of penetration, but I think we can get the same eventual penetration into our TAM. Within a year, they were doing about $170 million in annualized revenue. And again, we're within about 5% of their price point. Our TAM is about twice the size of theirs, a little more than twice the size of theirs. So if we did the same thing as tebentafusp for Kimmtrak, we would think at peak penetration, we'd be doing about $340 million in revenue. Now, we won't get there as fast. We have to train sites to do the procedure. We have to develop referral networks because we're not going to open this up in 200 sites. It's going to be more like somewhere between 20 and 30 sites will eventually be peak for this indication. But that gives you a sense of the fact that there is an unmet need here. Patients do need the product. The market is real. And even if we didn't achieve the 40% penetration that I personally calculate Kimmtrak does, even if we did half of that, we'd still be looking at close to just under 200 million in revenue. I think we will get to 40% eventually, but it'll take a couple of years to get there.
Okay. And now thinking through, obviously Kimmtrak has validated the market as you've illustrated, but that's only in half of the addressable patients.
Right.
So there's another half that aren't applicable for Kimmtrak. What are they getting now, and how do you compare?
So they're getting a mix of both systemic therapy. Usually, I think probably the most common is 2 checkpoint inhibitors, ipilimumab and nivolumab from BMS. And then they usually also get a liver-directed, whether it's TACE or Y90, less commonly. I think it's important to note that even for the patients with Kimmtrak, most of those should get our product as well. Most patients get 2 lines of therapy. Unfortunately, all patients will eventually progress who are on Kimmtrak. Similarly, all patients who use our drug will eventually progress, so almost all. There may be the occasional, rare bird out there that does manage to have, not succumb to the disease. So we think that those patients are also in our TAM as well. We've treated patients who are Kimmtrak eligible, and the docs thought that it made sense to first deal with the burden of disease in the liver, because liver's failure is what kills these patients. And we've also treated Kimmtrak, I don't want to call them failures, but call them Kimmtrak progressors, those who eventually. So I think all those patients are available to us. But yeah, for the patients who are not eligible for Kimmtrak, It's usually ipi-nivo is the systemic therapy, and one of the existing liver-directed therapies before us getting approved was generally used. We are on guidelines. It's important to note. So I think any of the other liver-directed therapies which have significant shortcomings will fall by the wayside.
Okay. And you mentioned before the number of sites you think you'll be in at peak, and you've provided a ton of very helpful granular commentary on how that's going to progress throughout the year. So would you mind just coloring in, how many sites are you in now, and how are you going to build that throughout the year?
Yeah, so I think it's worth taking a step back and just describing again what it takes to activate a site. This program is subject of a REMS from the FDA, and the REMS really is focused around training. Now, we would train these sites even without the REMS, but it does make it a little more burdensome in terms of the documentation and such that the FDA wants to see. To get a site up and running, not only do they need to do the normal lecture or didactic training, where we basically teach the docs how to do it on paper. They also need to attend a preceptorship. That means they need to go travel to an experienced site that's doing the procedure and see one. And then they need to be, when they do their first treatment, they need to be proctored, which means an experienced team needs to fly in and oversee the new site's first treatment. It would be very simple if it was just one doc who had to do this. In reality, the treatment team is comprised of 3 individuals: an interventional radiologist, an anesthesiologist, and a perfusionist. So we're trying to coordinate basically 6 healthcare professional schedules, as well as not to mention the patient themselves. So that will gate the uptake, the pace of the uptake, but not the eventual uptake of the product. Right now, in terms of fully trained sites, we have Duke University, Moffitt, Ohio State, and University of Tennessee. Only one of those is treated a commercial patient at the moment. That's Moffitt, because the other gating item is getting through, P&T and VAC committees. In terms of pending proctorships, i.e., they've done their preceptorship, they've flown and seen a case, the full team, but now they're waiting for a proctor to come and sit with them, as well as getting through P&T and VAC. There's Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Stanford University, Thomas Jefferson, which is the largest UVA melanoma treating center, and UCLA. We have another good dozen sites that are scheduling preceptorships or have raised their hand and have strong interest in the earlier stages of getting activated.
Interesting. Yeah. So definitely kind of an exponential launch for the first year or two. And as you said, the first patient was recently treated. Any anecdotal feedback from that process or that patient?
No, which I think is kind of no news is good news. I heard it was a pretty standard case, and really nothing to report. Spent the night in the hospital and then went home.
Great. Okay, so now just looking forward and translating this into the balance sheet cash flow statement. So how are you doing in terms of cash runway and cash burn? What do you have to get to in terms of revenue to start becoming cash flow positive?
So at our current R&D spend, or maybe a little bit higher, we should be cash flow break even at about $13 million in quarterly revenue. All right, which I think is like 75 treatments, give or take. Should get us there. On paper, we think we can get there by the end of the year, hit that run rate. Right now we are amortizing. We finished the third quarter with over 40 million in cash. If you just did the simple math of what our burn roughly was, we'd be a little over 30 million at the end of last year. The debt we have in the balance sheet is with Avenue Capital. It's a little under 9 million now. It's amortizing. That will finish amortization by August. If we didn't have that debt, we'd have probably 10 to 12 million in cushion. We get down pretty low in our internal projections, so it's probably prudent to refi that debt. So we're looking at a variety of options. I've had a number of our current equity holders, offer to buy blocks of stock. I don't want to do that. My preference is just to re-up that debt, and move forward and not dilute the existing shareholders.
Okay, makes sense. And you do have another tranche of financing outstanding, right? Is that on?
Right.
Can you just run through the details?
Sure. So we did a 3-tranche deal with led by Vivo Capital, BVF, Logos, Stone Pine, a number of other well-known names were part of that. That was $25 million up front, and then $35 million. It was a warrant-based deal. Was put in the company upon approval. There's another $25 million that comes in when we achieve $10 million in quarterly U.S. revenue. The interesting thing is, by the time we achieve that, we may not really need it because we're getting close to break even anyway. But that should help us, if we decide to put the pedal to the metal on further clinical development. That'll be of great help. So there's another $25 million in warrants struck at $6. Those sunset upon achieving $10 million in quarterly U.S. revenues. So that's the mechanism to force the conversion.
Okay. So obviously we spent almost all the time so far talking about the Hepzato launch. But there is, there's more clinical development going on. We'll keep it on Hepzato for now. So, well, it's all Hepzato essentially, but that Hepzato in uveal melanoma for now. I know you're doing the Chopin trial combining with nivolumab in higher up in the treatment paradigm. So, can you just go through what's the rationale behind the combining with Nivo, and what data has that trial generated so far?
Sure. So it's a combination with Ipi-Nivo. It's an investigator-initiated trial done at Leiden University in the Netherlands. Interestingly enough, pretty much every patient who could get our product in the Netherlands gets into this trial. It's this ultra-orphan indication, so that's not so crazy. It was considered standard of care in that country before they started the trial because they've been a long-term user of it. The rationale is twofold. One is, and this is kind of an old rationale of let's make a cold tumor hot. So if we treat with Hepzato, we'll introduce a variety of antigens that otherwise wouldn't be introduced, and therefore maybe the body will recognize the antigens and kind of turbocharged with the checkpoint inhibitors. The second rationale behind it is the liver is an immunotolerizing organ, and you've heard me say before, the portal vein wraps around your intestines, drops into the gut, into your liver. The liver is constantly being exposed to either antigens from something you've eaten or your own microbiome. It's well established that the liver induces systemic tolerance to those specific antigens. Otherwise, evolutionarily, the theory is we'd all be walking around with, inflammatory bowel disease of some type. The problem with that, and this is also very, very well documented, when you're on checkpoint inhibitors and getting some level of efficacy, that efficacy disappears when you have liver mets. Because all of a sudden, the resident immune cells in the liver are signaling, and I won't go through the cascade, I guess it's been over 30 years since I took immunology, but basically your body all of a sudden starts tolerizing to the antigens. It's one of the reasons people theorize it's so difficult to get rid of hepatitis. And any type of infection in the liver. But anyway, the theory is if we can reset the immune system, basically we're killing every rapidly growing cell in the liver, including immune system cells. If we can basically reset the immune system in the liver, perhaps the checkpoint inhibitors will work more effectively. So that's the other theory behind doing this. There was a phase 1 component of it that read out. The results were phenomenal, only 7 patients. So, on the one hand, I want to say, look at, the ORR was 86%, 100% disease control rate at just short of 3 years, which I think is the last time they read out. The follow-up, the patients were all still alive. And that's just amazing for this disease. But N equals 7, we've all seen examples where small n's, you get fooled. So I have to kind of restrain my enthusiasm to some extent. They are most of the way through. They should finish recruiting sometime this year for the 76 patient phase 2. And the control arm in that is actually Hepzato, or Chemosat as it's called in Europe, alone versus Chemosat plus Ipi-Nivo. There are other docs in the US and Europe who want to, tinker with various permutations of that. So we may fund some other IITs in combination with checkpoint inhibitors as well. So that's the only ongoing trial now. Now we have plenty of IITs in hand, proposals that we've been sitting on for years because of balance sheet issues and multiple other tumor types. And so, you know, whether it's an IIT or whether it's a sponsored trial, we expect to do a lot more of that as revenue ramps and as towards the end of the year.
All right. So I think we're just about up out of time. So with that, I just want to thank you for joining us and talking through the Delcath opportunity. It's going to be a big year, a big launch this year. So best of luck, and we look forward to tracking it.
Thanks so much, Bill. I appreciate the interest. And thank you, Ben,
Bill,
for having me.
Gerard, thank you so much for your time today. I certainly found it very informative, and I believe our audience will as well. Before we wrap it up, 2 quick reminders to everyone out there who has not already signed up for one-on-one. Please send me an email at shamsian@lythampartners.com, SHAMSIAN@lythampartners.com, or visit lythampartners.com/select2024. Again, don't forget Bill's presentation, 10 a.m. Eastern today. The webcast is available on the conference homepage. With that, thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of the day.